Tim Petrowich for Dateline, Marion, and it's time for our weekly visit with Marion head football coach Kerry Martin. A playoff edition of our visit, as we've done every year that we've been doing this, and the Wildcats in the playoffs for the 15th straight year. Before we talk about playoffs, let's talk about last week's season finale, 29-7 win over Mattoon. We talked after the game about the fact that Mattoon really came in wanting to control the ball, keep the ball out of your hands, and they did quite a bit. But when you got the ball, you were able to put some points on the board.
You know, that I think it's a good game plan for them. I think to keep the ball from our offense and control the clock, and they had multiple long drives that kept us off the field. The thing is, that works well as long as the game is close or as long as they had the lead or kept it tied. And once we got to a 3-score lead, I thought that offensive set worked against them. But again, at that point, it kept the game close, and a play here or a play there, and maybe they could have stayed in the game longer, but I felt like the first play of the third quarter, to start the second half, we threw a touchdown pass, and I think that was a backbreaker.
The question I was going to ask before we had to do our first do-over in like 11 years of doing this program, how difficult was it for your offense mentally, knowing that they wanted to get in there and couldn't get in there? Because when they did get in, they were very effective. They did what they needed to do, so it wasn't like they tried to press.
Well, I think the answer to your question is they handled it really well, because it can be difficult, because offense, as we've said numerous times, offense is rhythm, and when you don't have any rhythm, sometimes it's tough to get going. And we didn't have any chance to have rhythm, so. When we did have the ball, we seemed to execute really well. In fact, one drive we scored on, and it was called back, was one of the only drives in the first half we didn't score on. But point being, I think our kids handled that really well. They were patient. They didn't go out there and try to do too much. They just ran the offense. And even though they were on the sideline for long stretches of time, they stayed focused. That's a good sign.
Defensively, it was a bend but don't break type of a defense. You didn't give up any points till I think it was late in the third quarter, early in the fourth quarter, after the game was already 29-0. Still a few things maybe you want to work on defensively?
Yeah, I think our defense has took a step forward again this week. I think, we faced a very difficult offense. They were looking for 3 yards a game, 4 yards a game, 5 yards a game, whatever they could get, and they were getting it. They're big up front. They were foot to foot, and I think that's something they can do well against us. And I think going into the Triad game, who's going to be similar but more multifaceted, I think it was good for our kids before the Triad game to face that kind of offense. We had to figure some things out on defense. I think our kids did a good job of it. I think we had to work off some blocks and believe our keys and move our pad level down. And so I was proud of how well the defense played. You're right. We did bend, but the key was we didn't break. We got some turnovers in the red zone, which we've done all year, and we're going to have to do that and work that same magic this week against a very strong ball control team in Triad. But I thought overall our defense played well.
It's a situation in the last couple of weeks where the defense has played a lot in the last 2 games. Yeah. And so if nothing else, I mean, you're learning, you're getting better with more experience, but they're also building up a little bit of stamina.
Yeah, they are. And, as I said, in the playoffs, you don't know what kind of matchup you're going to get. And our first-round matchup happened to be against a similar ball control kind of team. But I think we've seen enough diversity now in our regular season. We've seen a lot of run. We've seen a lot of speed. We've seen spread teams. We've seen, double tight teams. So I feel like we're prepared for whatever we get in the playoffs. It's just a matter now of personnel and skill sets and things like that. And as you know, in the playoffs, 5A playoffs in particular, everybody's good. So somebody asked me about our first round pick and how good were they. I said, well, it's playoffs. They're all good. So there's degrees of good, but I think playoffs really comes down to matchups. And you're hoping you have a matchup that you can exploit and take advantage of, and I'm sure they feel the same way. And you're hoping that where you're strong, they might be weak, and you're hoping where you're weak, they're not strong. So it ought to be interesting. I love playoff football. I love to watch our kids elevate, because the teams that elevate are the teams that are going to stay and keep playing, and it'll be a big challenge for us, but we're excited.
I want to talk a little about Benson, because the last couple of weeks coming into this week, he had that Hail Mary catch against Carbondale, but otherwise he's been fairly quiet. He had a huge night Friday night, 2 long touchdowns, had some other catches.
Yeah.
I think that's got to be a confidence boost for him.
I think so too. We forget sometimes he's just a sophomore. We forget that because he had an impact last year and caught a touchdown in the playoff win against Rich East last year in the first round. And you begin to wonder, what is his ceiling? Does he have a ceiling, or is he just going to keep getting better? Because he could be a really, really special and dynamic player by his senior year, and he's already getting there as a sophomore. So he's a big-time weapon for us and been a big contributor to our team. And, we've got a nice complement of Frankie Horner on one side and John Tucker and Drake Gravatt in the backfield and Bryce Cabanis at tight end. So it's been a nice blend of a lot of different skill sets that have really worked well together. And Lucas has, used each of them maybe more one game, maybe more the next. Just depends on the situation and what they're giving us. And we've had games where Vince got double covered and he had to go to John and Frankie and Bryce. And so that's kind of the idea behind it.
A lot of your long touchdowns this year have been long balls to the sidelines, deep over the middle, things like that. You had 2 touchdowns Friday. One went for 71 yards, another one went for 23, but it could have gone for a whole lot more to Jonathan, where it was throws over the middle, and then the guys just caught the ball and ran and did their thing.
It's a good point, and we went into the season with trying to establish the vertical passing game. We thought that would fit our kids and I think fit what our quarterbacks can do, and I'm proud of the fact that we've gotten pretty good at it. And then what I think that's allowed is some of the short throws to go for greater yardage because the defense is a little aware of our ability to go deep. And so you talk about stretching the field vertically, and we also want to stretch it horizontally with our stretch game and our fast screens. And so hopefully we can put pressure on defenses to spread out both vertically and horizontally, and then open up some running lanes for our backs and some short throws to our receivers. And that's kind of the game plan. I'm sure it's pretty common among spread teams, but we've not always been a vertical passing team. Some years we were very short passing almost exclusively, and nice to see the ball get stretched down the field.
I want to talk about the season as a whole, kind of, and just a couple of things, because we've talked week to week and we pointed out some big things game to game. But one of the things, as I look back at the stats that has really impressed me, and it's even happened with a new face in the last couple of weeks, is that your team has done a good job of flipping the field whenever you had to kick the ball away on 4th down. Lucas is averaging almost 43 yards a punt, and now you turn around in the last couple of weeks, Dyson Roy's come in and he's had 2 fabulous punts in the last 2 weeks. And so now you've got that opportunity where, if you're deep in your own territory, you can force the other team to move the ball a little farther, or if you're close to midfield, you're pinning them deep in their own territory.
It is big. I mean, the statistics show that when a team starts at the 20 or 30 yard line, the chances of scoring are a certain percentage, and then as they move to the 35, 40, 45 yard line, they start to get to midfield, that chance goes way up. And our special teams coordinator, Dean Schulmeister, spends a lot of time preaching to the kids how much it means to pin a team down inside the 20. The chances of scoring greatly decrease. And so I think the offensive coaches get a little more conservative in that area. They're less likely to go for it on 4th and short down in that area, so you take away a down from them. If you can get them in a 3rd and long situation, you can kind of take some risks down there and maybe create some turnovers and big plays. I just feel like it's a little bit underrated these days. Field position can be a big factor, and we have seen that all year with our team, that flipping that field position, even if you don't score, to drive the ball enough to flip that field position can change the play calling for both yourself and your opponent.
Let's get into the playoffs and talk in general. We've mentioned this briefly a couple times, but we've been worrying about the next week in the regular season games, right. But now here's 15 years in a row in the playoffs for a school that in the previous 10 or 12 years had 1 playoff appearance, 2, maybe more than that, 20 years, I guess, 1 or 2 playoff appearances, and had a stretch in the mid-'80s. But it's something that now you talk about year after year, something that this community and this school, I think, kind of expects.
They do. There's an expectation to make the playoffs, and for some of our young players, they don't know Marion football without being a playoff team. So our incoming freshmen who are 14, 15 years of age, that's all they know as Marion football making the playoffs. And it's been a cool thing to watch. We've seen some coaching changes on the staff. We've seen graduation take some good players away, and it's nice to see the program able to handle some injuries. I think the schedule getting more difficult, graduation of large senior groups and talented players, people wondering how are you going to make it back to the playoffs. You lost 21 seniors, or you lost a Matt Brown, or you lost a Jaden Lacey, or you lost Austin Dixon, or whoever it may be. And I think it's been a lot of fun to watch new kids come into the program and step up. And I think a lot of that credit goes to previous players setting a standard for practice, for off-season work habits, for off-season training. I think because our younger players see what the older players and how they did it, I think that's really taught them this is what you've got to do if you want to be a playoff team. And so we're a bit into the players training the players year after year to maintain that tradition. And if you want to be a playoff team, you got to re-earn it. And to re-earn it, this is how you got to do it. You got to be there in the off season. You got to be there in the spring. You got to be there in the summer. You need to get out and play other sports to get better at football. You need to run track or compete in basketball or wrestling. So I think a lot of it has to do with the legacy left by the previous players in the past that have kind of set the standard for our kids.
You've talked quite frequently about the fact that every team is different. Every one of these 15 playoff teams is different. You've had some big name players. You mentioned Matt Brown, Jaden Lacey, Shaquille Ivy. You've had that group that had 4 Division I offensive linemen. You've had all kinds of big name players on this team over the years. What makes the 2019 Marion Wildcats different from the other ones?
That's a good question. I think one of the things that stands out to me is how well they work together. And I think we graduated 21 seniors last year, and my immediate concern was there were some big personalities and some good leaders in that group, and that group was very cohesive. And sometimes when you have that, sometimes the class behind that class can lack leadership because they've just always followed that group. We started working out in December for the 2019 season last year, and immediately there was leadership, and I mean good leadership, sound leadership coming from Cameron Kaiser and Davin Melvin and Drake Rabat and Lucas Will, and I mean just these guys, Frankie Horner, just even if they were in another sport, they were leading, but the guys in the weight room that were with us were leading. And I think that set the tone immediately. So I say all that to say this. I think their work ethic, their attitude, their willingness to sacrifice, and how well they play together to me is what sets this team apart. We always preach a little motto, it's got to be 11. On every snap, it's got to be 11 guys. We've probably not had any playoff team that needed to play together more than this group. When they play together, they play at a very high level. And I think they know when they don't play well together, when they don't gel, when someone does something they shouldn't do on the field, takes the wrong step, we get pretty average pretty fast. But that's not a bad thing. I think the fact they rely on each other so heavily, we don't have these great Division I standout players right now. Vince may someday be, but we have a lot of blue-collar, lunch pail, hard hat kind of guys that need to go out and earn it every snap. And I think that's what this team will always remind me of. It's just that blue-collar work ethic, get it done together, because if we're going to win this thing, we got to do it together. And I think that pays off, especially even when they get down a score or 2 in a ball game and they've had that ability to come back. They come back together. There isn't one guy that leads us who runs a punt back, picks a ball off. It's a collective effort.
Let's talk about the playoffs, this year's playoffs, and a familiar name. Coming to Marion, you've had some pretty good games. You've only played each other in the playoffs that I can tell.
Yeah.
But the Triad Knights come to town, and the first thing I can tell by looking at the stats, and I printed out some stats, is there's no secret what they're going to do. They've got about 2,800 yards in total offense, and about 300 of it is passing. So they run the ball 90% of the time.
They do, and they always have. And they do what they do. Their head coach has been there a long time and does a tremendous job. And he sticks to his philosophy. He doesn't deviate from it. He does what he does on defense. He does what he does on offense, and he does it well. He does it year after year. And much like our fans are familiar with us being in the playoffs, Triad's fans are familiar with them being a playoff team. They are always at the top of that conference. And, they're just known for that hard-nosed, grinded-out option, tough football. And they always seem to have big linemen. I mean, I've never seen a Triad team that didn't have great size at tight end, at running back, on the offensive line. So we get the matchup with Triad, we get the film, you look at it and you go, some things never change, right? So we have a saying that of all the teams that we've ever played, two teams look the same no matter what year you put the film in. Cahokia and Triad tend to look very similar all the time. Similar styles, similar athletes, similar philosophy coaching-wise. Even though Cahokia has had a couple of coaching changes since I've been here, they look very similar year after year, and I think Triad is that way.
Their quarterback is the key to their offense. He's their leading rusher. Of course, he throws the ball every once in a while, but not very often. But when he's got the ball in his hands, he's the one who decides who gets it, and they've got four guys that are close to or more than 500 yards rushing for the season.
That's the thing. It's not one guy to key on because they can use multiple guys to hurt you, and our fans will notice quickly that they're going to be big up front, they're going to be ball control, and they're going to be looking for that same thing Mattoon did, that 4 or 5 yards of carry and long drives, wait for you to make a mistake and then pop a run. Maybe even wait for you to make a mistake and try to get the ball down the field. But when they throw, they're throwing usually for touchdowns, play action off of something. So, it'll be an interesting matchup where we're more of a spread team, spread the field and spread it around, and they're more of a pack it in and drive the ball. So two contrasting styles will meet on that field Saturday.
Tell me if you've noticed this as well. While you have tended over the course of the years, the defense has tended to kind of struggle a little bit with the option team that has a running quarterback. Against Triad, you seem to have had success where you're doing that. I remember they came down here one time and you held them to 10 points, and I think you actually tried to control the ball a little bit too. But at the same time, you've had a reasonable success stopping that with Triad.
Yeah, we're 2-1 in the playoffs against them, but we beat them twice here, and they beat us up there in 2011. So the games have been pretty close. I mean, there's never been a real blowout. But the year we beat them here in 2010, I think that's the year we matched up with them size-wise. And I think that was where, for the first time, maybe the only time, we could play Triad and match up size for size up front. And so that doesn't normally happen. So
it helps, though.
It does. And we use a little more tight that ball game because that team was more of a tight team, and we compacted in ourselves, and we did control the clock a little bit, and we used tight, I think, to score our last 2 touchdowns. But I think that the point being is that when we see a team like Triad, we understand what their strengths are, what our strengths are. We're hoping that we can do some things that maybe they don't defend well, and I'm sure they plan on doing things we don't defend well, and that's what makes it such a cool chess match to play them, because other than that 1 year, our styles can be very different, and our goals of trying to get the ball in the end zone will be very different.
Is there a balance you have to weigh between doing what you do and possibly getting that quick touchdown and making sure that you don't overextend that defense by keeping them out on the field?
Yeah, we talked about that Friday a little bit. We were scoring really quick. And, of course, Coach Dunning was giving up some long drives but no points. But then we would get the ball and score twice on the first play.
Right.
So we didn't give our defense a chance at all to catch their breath even, which may have led to some other long drives that maybe they just didn't have the energy or the stamina to stop. But I will say this. No, we don't really. We've gotten, in the 15 years in our spread offense, we have decided the worst thing we can do is try to pace ourselves to the end zone. We have found that when we do that, we lose rhythm and we end up not scoring. So we just apologize and say, sorry, we scored so fast, but if we got to score on the first play or 3 plays or 4 plays, and if we got to do it in an up-tempo style, we're going to score touchdowns. And then we'll worry about the end result of that later. So it would help if we would sometimes take a little longer to score, but our biggest concern is we do that and then we don't score at all. Right. So we're going to try to put points on the board as quickly as we can, and we hope that works out on Saturday. But I know that we're facing a very formidable defense that will be a real challenge for us. But as I said, that's what makes it so exciting.
They're kind of in a little bit of a slump. They've lost their last 3 after a 6-0 start, but then you look at who they played in those last 3 games.
Right.
Highland, Civic Memorial, and undefeated Mount Zion, all teams that have made the playoffs.
Exactly. So, I mean, people look at that and, well, maybe a slump, maybe it's not a slump. But you could play really well in those 3 games and lose. I mean, so I don't see it as much as a slump as just they played really good competition, and they played those 3 teams well. So I think it's probably more about schedule than it is anything else. But we expect they'll come in here ready to go, and we will be too.
2 things that that is hard to beat: football game in Marion and a football game on Saturday afternoon in November. And now you get to combine those 2 things on Saturday.
Yeah, it's exciting, and we don't take it for granted. It's a cool thing. It's tough to be a playoff team. It's tough to win your guaranteed number and qualify, and we want to take advantage of every opportunity we get. And we really wanted to play the game on Friday to kind of recreate our Friday night atmosphere, but both teams have to agree, and it's understandable. I mean, some teams just don't want to play on a Friday; they want that extra day, and so we agreed for Saturday at 2:00, and so we're looking forward to a good crowd. Last year, our home playoff win against Rich East was a good crowd for a Saturday afternoon, so we're hoping we can get a full house here and create that same atmosphere on Saturday.
He touched on the details. Saturday afternoon, 2:00 here at Wildcat Stadium. Triad 6-3, Marion 8-1. Gates open at 12 noon. So if you don't have your ticket, get here at noon and get your ticket. Make sure you get one before they're all gone, right?
That's right.
I don't think they'll actually sell out. I think they'll let anybody in.
Yeah.
All right, that's Marion head coach Kerry Martin for Dateline Marion. I'm Tim Petrowich.